Time for a Swiss Army knife show and tell. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.
So I found this small tinker at an estate sale probably about 10 years ago. Uh, I saw it and I knew right away that it was a relatively older tinker. Did not know exactly how old it was at the time, but I knew it was one of the older ones. But it was brand new, mint in the box, even though the box was a little beat up, as you can see here. The box does not give a date on it or anything. You see it is marked tinker. It came with the paperwork for it and everything else, which basically the paperwork explains how to use the can opener and such. And the can opener had the patent mark on it here. Let's see here. See where it says patent. So I knew it was a relatively older Swiss Army knife, and it's an 84 millimeter tinker, so I definitely wanted to pick it up, and I got it for like $15 or $20. I got it for a relatively low price. They were saying, well, it's like a new tinker, so, or they said it's like a new Swiss Army knife, so they were charging me new prices for it, which was fine. I knew it was an older one. And I also knew it was in basically new old stock or never used condition, so why wouldn't I go ahead and pick it up for $20? And that's what I did. And you can see, I mean, I have not restored this. This is the way it came. And I have never used it since then because of, well, how old it was to begin with. And it was easy for me to determine just how old the knife was simply because, like probably several other people who go around talking about dating Swiss Army knives, they have the book Swiss Army Knives Owner's Manual by Michael M. Young. If you're really interested in Swiss Army knives, you need to pick up that book because he has a chronology of when different things showed up on Swiss Army knives in it, and that's basically the way most of us probably end up dating these knives. Now, if you're in Europe, there's probably several other sources that that are not in English that also help with it, and some of them might be a little more accurate because there are a few mistakes in Michael Young's book, but for the most part, it gives you a good idea of just how old these knives are. And one of the reasons I knew this was going to be a relatively older one was because this one has the file on the squared off Phillips driver. So I knew this was one of the earlier Phillips drivers, and I knew it was a sign that the knife was relatively old. And basically, by looking at Michael Young's book, I was able to determine that that file on the Phillips driver goes away in 1969. Now this knife is really interesting, at least on for me, because it also has a certain type of tang stamp. Not on this side, but on this side, where it says Victoria Officer Suiza, and it has a crossbow going through there. And that particular tang stamp was used on the back of the blade from 1968 to 1974. And because of those two things, I know that this knife was made in either 1968 or 1969. Now, normally you can't get that accurate with a Swiss Army knife. But in the case of this one, because of the way those two things overlap, I'm able to determine that this knife came out in one of those 2 years. And that's why that book by Michael Young is helpful. It can give you an approximate date of when your Swiss Army knife came out. The only other way you'll really ever know when your Swiss Army knife came out is if you're actually picking up Swiss soldiers' knives, which actually have the date of manufacture on them. But in the case of this little small tinker, from 68 to 69, it's fairly easy to find out simply by looking at Michael Young's book. This one's interesting also. Some of the other things that might have helped date it would have been like a key ring, no key ring in there, We know that it doesn't have exposed rivets, so that gives us a little bit of an idea that it's in the modern era. Other things that could have been used to date it also are things like the cutting edge on the cap lifter screwdriver. That also helps you with the dating of the knife and things of that nature. And the fact that it has well, it's an older style reamer, but it's not the quarter round reamer. So this was also more from the modern era, or from at least from like the 1960s or so. But anyway, those give you approximate dates and let you know that the knife is a little bit older. But in this case, I was able to get it right down to either 1968 or 1969.
Thanks for watching this SAK show and tell.